the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. The policies of President Trump, in combination with the intention to hire 15,000 additional Border Patrol and Immigration and Custom Enforcement officers, has sent fear throughout many immigrant and refugee communities. Particularly worried are families in which the parents may be undocumented, but some of their children were born in the United States and are citizens, but not yet old enough to live on their own. In response, churches across the country are organizing to declare themselves sanctuary churches, open to sheltering families from ICE authorities. Several weeks ago, Jeanette Vizguera and her children sought sanctuary in First Unitarian Church in Denver. Although the threat may seem more immediate in the Southwest and the West, churches in Cincinnati have also begun to organize in preparation to lend assistance to distressed families. I am joined this morning by two people active with this effort. Elizabeth Brown is a member of Christ Church, the Episcopal Cathedral downtown on 4th Street. Christ Church is the only congregation at this point to declare itself a sanctuary congregation, but over a dozen, almost 20 other congregations have committed to be solidarity parishes, ready to support the effort with funding and volunteers. And Salvador Leavitt-Alcantara, whose family fled El Salvador during the Civil War of the 1980s and came to the United States. He is now an American citizen and works at a local hospital as a chaplain. Elizabeth, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Salvador, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Let's begin with just sort of the basics here. What's the law on this? If a family took refuge at Christ Church, does that mean that legally ICE cannot come in, that they're really protected? What are we dealing with here?
Right, it's not a legal protection. The law doesn't make an exemption for churches. However, the practice of sanctuary is very historic, has been around for centuries really, and up to now, the immigration authorities have considered churches a sensitive area and have instructed their law enforcement folks not to raid churches, not to go into churches to arrest people. So that could change at any point in time. It's not a legal exemption, but it's something that has been respected in the past.
And does the sanctuary church movement have anything directly to do with the fact that City Council announced that Cincinnati was a sanctuary city?
No, it's a totally separate idea.
Okay.
This is, the sanctuary congregations come out of our faith-based, what we believe,
Right.
of what we need to do as part of our religion to support folks, to welcome strangers and to do what's necessary for our neighbors. The city's statement is more of a law enforcement type thing, what the Cincinnati police will be doing, but it's a totally separate issue.
Okay. Salvador, tell us a little bit about your particular story, without getting into every detail. Mm-hmm. But how was your family, part of this process that we're talking about now in terms of families who have fled to the United States looking for refuge from war-torn areas?
Yeah, I was 9 years old when my mother immigrated to this country. She overstayed her visa, and I stayed behind with my 3 siblings and my grandmother. We're separated for about 13 years.
13 years?
13 years. My mother came to this country, overstayed her visa. She became an undocumented immigrant. Later, she became a resident and then became a U.S. citizen. And that's when I could come in with legal papers, and I entered as a resident.
So you came in legally?
Yes.
But because your mother came in undocumented, or at least the documents ran out, which is not uncommon, the visa ran out. So she was undocumented, but then she came at a time when there was an updating of immigration laws, which allowed her then to get residency and citizenship.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. And I think my when you actually think about the overstaying, it was a conscious decision that she made because
Right.
she was escaping the war. She was a single mom with 4 children, and they was in the midst of a civil war. And so she decided the only way that I can be able to provide for my family is by overstaying and eventually, hopefully, reuniting with them.
Did your mother ever have to use sanctuary? Because sanctuary was operating in congregations in the 1980s. Did she ever have to use it?
No, she did not. She did not. But San Francisco, the city of San Francisco, where she immigrated, was a sanctuary city. So she felt very protected in the city because of policies that cities implement to protect undocumented immigrants.
Elizabeth, realistically, I mean, your congregation is the only one that's declared that it will take families. Realistically, how many families, how many people, whatever the number is, could you shelter?
I don't think it's a matter of how many the church can hold, near as much as, how many folks would really need or want to go into that situation. You have to understand that sanctuary at the church is not hiding people. It's not, folks in the church basement hiding away like the Underground Railroad. This is a public declaration. And so you have to have a family that is under a deportation order but has a viable legal appeal still possible. But they could still be sent out of the country immediately if they're arrested. And they have to be willing to go public. The Denver
So this is a public situation.
Right. The first thing we would do in taking somebody into sanctuary is hold a press conference where they would appear. So you have to have a family that is willing to do that, to come under that spotlight.
Yeah.
And that's unusual. That is highly unusual. I think that all the enthusiasm that's come out of the congregations, there will be more churches that sign up as sanctuary congregations. Many of them have long approval processes, so they're not yet there. But there's all this enthusiasm to do something to help.
Yes.
The number of people say, I want to help. And I think there will be other ways of doing that, of working with the immigrant populations in other ways.
And Salvador, from the immigrants' perspective, it's not about numbers. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be huge numbers of people.
No.
Is it important though?
It is very important because if we go back to the case of my case, right, my mother, with the current political discourse, what she is basically an illegal criminal that came and broke the law. Mm-hmm. From my perspective, from the human perspective, from the 9-year-old child perspective, that's my mother who's escaping civil war, who's trying to provide a future for me and my siblings. See, what we are trying to do is to put on the table, there is more to this immigration discourse than just the simple fact that they are only illegal and criminals, right? And so that what we're trying to say is no, they're foreigners. They're people who have, they're mothers, they're parents, they're people who are escaping very bad situations back in their home countries, and we are respecting, we are inviting them, we are providing for them the dignity that they deserve, right? They are more than just a legal category. Mm-hmm. And so that's the part that I think we are trying to let people know. These are moms, these are parents, these are people who are poor, they're people who are escaping wars and domestic violence or whatever you want, right? These are folks who are real human beings just like you and I.
Right, and I think this idea of being criminals, we have this sense, we're just sending criminals out of the country. Mm-hmm. Well, you're a criminal when you enter without permission, when you don't have your papers in order. And, you're a criminal when you try to work to support your family because you have to use a fake ID to do that. So all of a sudden you have a felony on your record if you get caught for using a fake ID. And now you are a criminal, but your crime is working. I mean, and for us in this country to say, we're going to do these things to folks because they dared to work.
Let me be clear about that too, on the second point. A lot of times people, it's this thing about using fake ID, meaning a fake Social Security number, so that the employer can pay Social Security, regular taxes, Social Security, Medicare taxes. The taxes are being paid. People are working paying taxes will never have access to that Social Security or Medicare benefits that they're paying into. So let's be clear, it's a violation of the law, but it's a violation of the law that actually feeds the system.
Right.
The system.
Right,
So,
exactly.
On the other hand, though, what do you say to Americans who say, wait a minute, why should we protect this huge, vast number of people who have come in? Now it's, who knows what the number is, but let's use 11 million, 11.5 million, whatever it is. Why should the United States do this? Why should people be allowed to continue to live here without documentation?
I think it's important to realize that in Europe right now, you have European countries that are seeing a huge number of immigrants and refugees and have accepted and are dealing with some difficulty, those folks. And for us to say, oh no, nobody can come here, we're gonna, build a wall around ourselves, I think is wrong. From a faith perspective, I mean, that's how I would answer it. It's not a policy perspective, but my faith tells me that is wrong. That is something we cannot do. And in most faith perspectives, you have to believe that and act your faith, regardless of what the government says.
I think from the human perspective, and I'm a parent of 2 children now, right? And I'm thinking about, well, let's say that I came here undocumented, and now my children were born in this country. And we're talking about 11 million undocumented immigrants. We're not talking about their families, right?
Who include more people.
Who includes more people, and who includes, I don't know how many millions of American children who were born in this country, who have now their parents have facing the deportation. So from a human perspective for me, is what are we going to do with these children? I mean, we're supposed to be, for me, family values is very important as part of my faith. And if we're going to talk family values, sometimes we have to acknowledge that there are some families here that we are facing the real threat that we're breaking families apart by sending these parents back.
My understanding is, I mean, there's the sanctuary congregations, but that there's also, speaking directly to this point, a search for people who are willing to step forward as individuals who will say, if someone is deported and their children are left behind, and that's exactly what happens because they can be rounded up while they're at work.
That's right.
And they're separated from their children. That people to step forward who can be guardians for a period of time until those parents and children can figure out how to get reconnected. Is that correct?
That's correct. I have a friend in California, Richmond, California. Both parents are undocumented, and their 2 children were born here. I am right now the person that they're going to send the child to if they face deportation. So, and I've been trying to convince them, I think it's better for you to bring the child with you, even though it's going to be hard. But I think the family separation between the 2 is going to be more difficult for her, even though she's going to be in her country. Okay. And so that's the reality. In our last meeting during our sanctuary, somebody actually said we need volunteers to be able to be willing to put your name for babies who've been born in this country of undocumented mothers.
And isn't that pitiful? I mean, isn't that pitiful?
That was an announcement that was made in our last meeting.
For the United States to be at that point.
And we decided, my wife and I are actually discussing, like, maybe we should put our name just in case. But we're talking about, I'm going to take care of a baby because the mother is going to be just deported. And so as a person of faith, that's something inconceivable to me. That if we're talking about family values, we are willing to destroy families through this process.
I'm out of time, but Elizabeth, what's your hope of other congregations joining the effort? And I'm going to talk about how people can keep in touch with this, but do you believe that, you said earlier you thought that
I know
others
of a
were...
number of congregations that are in what they call a discernment process to decide whether they can do this. It requires a church that has the facilities to house somebody, so not every church can do it. But the overwhelming support from other congregations who want to help, who want to do something. Solidarity congregations has been just amazing.
Okay. Thank you both for being here this morning. Thank you for the work you're doing in the community, and we may have you back as this whole process moves forward. To learn more about the sanctuary movement in Cincinnati, monitor the Amos Project website and especially their Facebook page at www.theamosproject.org or the Facebook Amos Project /Amos Project. Okay. Stay tuned. After the break, a progress report on the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance. Welcome back. Over the last several years, a fresh, concerted movement to serve diverse needs of local veterans has organized as the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance. The Alliance strives to align community support for veterans and their families as they transition from military life to becoming active members of the Tri-State community. Currently, approximately 145,870 veterans live in the 16-county metropolitan region. Veterans make up slightly less than 9% of the entire population. The largest single cohort are Vietnam vets, almost 50,775. One of the things that is changing in the projected growth in numbers is the number of women veterans. Today they make up about 8% of all local veterans in our community. By 2030, they could be projected to make up 16%, twice as much as today. To discuss the Veterans Network, I'm joined by Dan Knowles, the Executive Director of the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance. Mr. Knowles is an Army veteran and worked for 16 years for Procter & Gamble before founding Ubiquity, a business consulting firm. He also serves as the chair of the Regional West Point Society of Leaders. And John Sanchez, who graduated from the Naval Academy, served as a Navy SEAL, and worked for PNC Bank before launching his own business last year. He is the founder and CEO of Team Performance Institute, which helps companies improve their performance and individuals enrich their lives. Both of you, welcome to Newsmakers. Dan, welcome back. Yeah. John and I have known each other for a while.
It's great to see you. Thanks for having us.
Dan, let's start with you. What has really been accomplished over, say, the last 2 years since you've gotten up and sort of formally open and operating?
Well, thanks for asking, Dan. Thanks for having us here. You know, it's been a tremendous journey, and we've been very, very privileged and honored to serve so many veterans and their families in the tri-state area. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to open up a veteran in-processing center, and it's located at the CityLink Center downtown near Finley Market.
On Bank Street?
That's correct. And through that, we're staffed by veterans. We're an independently veteran-led organization. So we're staffed by veterans and spouses of veterans. And we serve those, we've served over 775 veterans as of last week, and their family members in terms of helping them get new jobs, get connected to the right educational opportunities, get connected into the right health and wellness opportunities as well in the community through our network of 110 different partner organizations.
And the growth of the partner organizations is significant too, that you've got that many organizations who have made a formal commitment.
Exactly. Since we opened up the in-processing center, we've grown from about 35 to 40 partners to just over 100 partners now.
John, the focus, as it seems to me, is this transition period from active service back into the community. Mm-hmm. What are the challenges there for people?
Yeah, so the focus is a big part of that transition. I think military veterans go through this transition not fully knowing what's to be expected of them. They can come to a place like the Veterans Community Alliance, come in those doors and kind of have a warm hug from those who've not only been there, served in the military, but also have trained and now know how to train them in making that transition effectively. Challenges that are simple. I think one of the first challenges primarily is exposure. What's really out there? What can I do and how do my skills translate? Mm-hmm. And through the programs that we have at the Veterans Community Alliance, we're going to show them this. Your skills are very translatable. What you can do, what you have done in the Army.
Sometimes it's a matter of knowing what language and how to translate from the military language and what they've done into what civilian jobs ask for.
That's exactly right. Being able to, we work a lot with the veterans on being able to tell your story.
Yeah.
Can you tell your story? They were born into this military indoctrination system where they become very all about the team. They become, they put the mission first, their team second, themselves last. When they go into a job interview, that can be discouraging because they're not used to talking about themselves. They might be up against other college graduates that are very well versed in talking about themselves or even self-promoting, which is not a veteran quality that we espouse. But once we learn to help them tell their stories, that helps them then articulate their skills.
In a recent report that you did, you have a graph about this transition process and how you're trying to smooth it out, speed it up, which is one of the most interesting graphs I've ever seen in my life. So here it is. The lower line is sort of the traditional approach with all the loops backwards, up and down.
That's exactly
in
right.
The upper line. Now, is that lower line based on scientific data?
No, I'll be the first one to tell you that it's not a database graph. It is. But it does represent what we have gathered from so many veterans and their individual stories. And the background of this is actually a very positive thing. This community is tremendously open and welcoming to veterans and their families. So much so that when a veteran returns to this area, they're overwhelmed by different organizations and programs that are reaching out to help. And what typically happens with any veteran or any of us is that when you're overwhelmed by offers of help, you tend to back away and say, well, wait, I'll figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
Right? And when they do that, what happens is they've underestimated how difficult it can be to get a plan in place and start to work that through a very, very fragmented service environment in a community, just as any community is.
Right.
And that's what happens when they try to do it themselves. That's that lower red line in the graph. And they'll go up, they'll go down, and each one of those little troughs represents the nadir of their journeys. And those are the places where depression, where substance abuse, and other things really start to be a problem. When that happens, it's the community who has to lift them up with their emergency assistance services, and that costs the community money. So that's why that bottom red line is so tortuous. You go up and down, back and forth, and
in circles.
And correct, and sometimes even in circles.
Yeah. There's a lot of programs and I'm going to send people to your website because there's a lot of things to find. But John, I know something you've been working on is something called Vet Excel. What is this?
Right. Well, it's a program at the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance, and there's really it's Dan's baby, and he's built it out beautifully. It's nothing but just think about it as a really neat training program for transitioning veterans. They come out. We have local support from some really great companies who've been able to come on board and support this. Say, I want to get involved, step up to it, and just great companies. If you can give these guys not only a head start, but an accelerant into our programs, they get weeks to go through. We have veterans come in, veterans who are out like myself, been out for a long time, get to come in, talk to them about the real deal and transitioning into a bank or into a hospital, what that may look like. The program takes them on site every week.
Those are very different environments. We've got a graph on that too, and it actually indicates some of the companies that are involved in that. So this is what, a 6-week program?
It'll be 5 to 6 weeks typically, and the one thing I should mention is that this program has been set up, and we have a tremendous program manager that's running this, a guy named Dan Hance, who's an Army veteran as well, and has just done a superb job taking his experience and building right into this program. But the key is that recruitment and screening process that we use. The people that we're allowing into this are only a fraction of those that have actually applied. We've had applications from veterans all over the country.
Is that a capacity question, or is that you just can't take any more than that?
There are certainly some capacity issues that we're scaling this up, but the bigger issue is the quality of the people, because we have some very specific criteria we're bringing in.
So you're screening.
These are young leaders who have proven themselves time and again in the military.
Okay. There's a lot more to learn about this effort, but I want to make sure people know how to find you. To learn more about the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance, check out their website at Tri-State,
VCA.
Tri-State VCA. .org. And don't forget about the Real Abilities Film Festival, which we featured last Sunday. It's coming up on March 9th and 12th. And a number of the featured films, including Recovering on the 10th and Stray Dog on the 11th, focus on veterans. And there's some other veteran events going on, keynote speakers those 2 days on the 10th and 11th that are really important. Thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. And the exciting thing about this is you're still gearing up. You're still figuring out how to make this work, and it's really important to us. Thank you for making Newsmakers part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet David Pepper, the chair of the Ohio Democratic Party.